When my daughter told me I'd never be enough for my grandchildren, I nodded silently, walked out of her house, and made one phone call. By the following week, I'd canceled my retirement fund transfers, closed joint accounts, and removed her name from my property deeds. After 50 years of sacrificing everything for her happiness, I finally chose my own. You won't believe what happened when she realized she had to raise those kids without my money or time. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts in the comments. They're just so busy with all their activities. Dad, Jessica said, stirring her coffee while carefully avoiding my eyes. Piano lessons on Mondays, soccer practice Tuesdays and Thursdays, art club on Wednesdays. Weekends are for birthday parties and playdates. There's just no room in their schedule for for their grandfather. I finished for her, my voice steadier than I felt. The words hung between us in her pristine kitchen, the one I'd helped finance when she and Robert bought this house in the expensive school district she'd insisted was essential for the children's future. We sat at her Marble Island countertop, the one I'd paid for during their necessary kitchen renovation last year. Through the large bay windows, I could see the playset in the backyard I'd assembled myself last summer, despite my arthritis. The playset the kids had used exactly twice while I was visiting. Jessica sighed dramatically, setting down her mug with a precise clink on the coaster. It's not just the schedule, Dad, well, Robert and I have been talking with Dr. Levinson, the children's development specialist. She says consistency is crucial at this age, and your, methods, my methods. I raised an eyebrow, genuinely confused. You're too permissive with them. The ice cream before dinner last time, the extra screen time, the way you let them stay up late. It undermines our authority and confuses them. I absorbed this silently. 2 visits in the past 6 months, totaling less than 48 hours with my grandchildren. And I was somehow undermining years of their parenting. I see, I said quietly. So what are you suggesting? Jessica straightened in her chair, looking relieved that I wasn't arguing. We think it's best if visits are more structured, maybe once a month, for an hour or two, with Robert or me present. Of course, I echoed, thinking of the 3-hour drive each way that would now be for a supervised 60-minute visit. And Dad, Jessica's voice took on the condescending tone she'd perfected since her promotion to senior management. Maybe leave the gifts at home. We're trying to teach the kids that love isn't about material things. I nearly laughed at the irony. Sitting in this shrine to materialism, being lectured about material things by the daughter, whose college tuition, wedding, house down payment, and countless emergencies had been financed by my retirement savings. I understand, I said, though I didn't. Not really. Jessica seemed encouraged by my calm response. It's just that parenting has changed so much since your day. All the research shows, Jessica, I interrupted gently. I did raise you, remember, and you turned out well enough to know better than me, apparently. Her cheeks flushed, but she pressed on. That's exactly what I mean, Dad. Those outdated approaches. The world is different now. The children need guidance that's, well, current. I looked at my daughter, really looked at her. The designer clothes, the highlighted hair, the practiced expressions of concern that never quite reached her eyes. When had she become this person? This stranger who saw me as some outdated model that needed to be managed rather than her father. I just want what's best for the kids, I said. Meaning it. I know you do, Jessica replied, reaching across to pat my hand in a gesture so patronizing I had to resist the urge to pull away. But sometimes what's best is knowing when to step back. The truth is, Dad, double quotes, she paused, seeming to choose her words carefully before apparently deciding that brutal honesty was the efficient route. You'll never be enough for them, not in the way they need. The world they're growing up in requires experiences and advantages you just can't provide. The words hit like a physical blow. 50 years of love, sacrifice, and support reduced to, you'll never be enough. I nodded slowly, my mind suddenly quiet and clear in a way it hadn't been in years. I think I understand perfectly now. I'm so glad. Jessica smiled, obviously relieved that the difficult conversation was over. So we'll see you next month. The 3rd Saturday would work best for us, from 2 to 4. Sure, I said, standing up. The 3rd Saturday. Jessica walked me to the door, chattering about the children's recent achievements, Emma's perfect spelling test, Noah's soccer trophy. I nodded at appropriate intervals. But I was already gone in all the ways that mattered. Drive safely. Dad, she called as I walked to my car. I raised my hand in acknowledgement but didn't look back. In my rearview mirror, I caught a glimpse of her already on her phone, probably telling Robert that she'd successfully managed the dad situation as I pulled away from the sprawling house that symbolized everything I'd worked for and everything I'd lost. I made a decision. If I wasn't enough for them, then perhaps they needed to discover what life was like without me at all. The 3-hour drive back to my modest home in Clayton gave me plenty of time to reflect on how I'd reached this point. Memories flickered through my mind like an old slideshow, each image sharper and more painful than the last. I'd been just 23 when Lisa told me she was pregnant, young, terrified, but determined to do the right thing. We married quickly, a small ceremony at the courthouse with only our parents present. I dropped out of college with just 1 semester left, taking a job at my uncle's construction company to support my new family. "You can finish your degree later," Lisa had said, cradling her growing belly. Family comes first. Family always came first. It became my mantra through the years. Jessica arrived on a stormy April morning in 1976. Perfect and red-faced and screaming with healthy lungs. I held her tiny body against my chest, marveling at her miniature fingers and the wisp of dark hair that matched Lisa's. "I'll give her the world," I'd whispered to my exhausted wife. Everything I never had, and I'd tried. God knows I'd tried. When Lisa died of breast cancer when Jessica was only 8, I became both mother and father, working days on construction sites and nights at a warehouse to afford the dance lessons, the braces, the summer camps that Jessica's friends attended. I learned to braid hair, to bake birthday cakes, to navigate the mysterious world of girls' clothing departments. My own parents helped when they could, but they were aging themselves, with health problems of their own. My father died when Jessica was 12. My mother followed 3 years later. There was no extended family safety net, just me, determined that Jessica would never feel the absence of anything she needed or wanted. I pulled into a rest stop, suddenly needing a moment away from the highway. The digital clock on my dashboard read for 17 p.m. Jessica wouldn't miss me for hours yet, might not even realize I hadn't made it home until she tried calling tomorrow with some new restriction on my grandparent privileges. I walked into the rest stop cafe and ordered a black coffee, settling into a booth by the window. Outside, families bustled between minivans and the building, parents corralling energetic children, teenagers slouching with bored expressions, normal family dynamics playing out in miniature. My mind drifted back to Jessica's high school years, the college tours I'd driven her to across 6 states, the SAT prep courses I'd worked overtime to afford, the carefully maintained GPA that had won her a partial scholarship to Northwestern. Not a full ride, of course. That would have been too convenient. I'd remortgaged my house to cover the difference. $97,000 over 4 years, plus another $23,000 for the semester abroad in Paris she'd insisted was broader crucial for her international business degree. I'd never told her about the mortgage. Why burden her with my financial worries? Her job was to study hard and build the future I hadn't been able to have. My job was to make it possible. The waitress refilled my coffee with a sympathetic smile. "Long day, long life," I replied, surprising myself with the candor. After Northwestern came the MBA from Columbia, another $114,000. By then, Jessica had met Robert, the ambitious finance major from a good family who never quite looked me in the eye. His parents hosted the engagement dinner at a country club where the parking attendant had given my 50-year-old Toyota a dubious look. "Don't worry about the wedding," Robert's mother had said with practiced graciousness. "The bride's family has enough to manage." The bride's family, me. Just me. The wedding cost $68,000, a modest affair by their standards. I sold my mother's jewelry and cashed out what little remained of my 401k. Jessica had been worth every penny in her white designer gown, beaming as she danced with her new husband beneath crystal chandeliers. "You've given me everything, Dad," she'd whispered during our father-daughter dance. "I'll never forget it." But she had forgotten. Somewhere between the honeymoon in Bali and the corner office, she'd forgotten the man who'd worked 16-hour days for decades to give her the foundation for her success. When they'd found their forever home in the prestigious Oakwood Hills neighborhood, I'd contributed $85,000 to the down payment, most of what I'd managed to rebuild in my retirement fund. When they'd struggled with the payments during Robert's company restructuring, I'd sent $2,500 monthly for nearly a year. Just until things stabilize, Jessica had assured me, "We'll pay you back with interest." They never did. The loan transformed into a gift through the alchemy of time and convenience. And I'd let it happen because that's what fathers did. We gave without expectation of return. Emma was born 7 years ago, Noah following 2 years later. My beautiful grandchildren, who knew me primarily through FaceTime calls and the presents I mailed for birthdays and Christmas. Presents that apparently now constituted an unwelcome intrusion into their carefully curated upbringing. I paid for my coffee and returned to my car, the decision I'd made outside Jessica's house, solidifying with each mile marker. For 50 years, I'd been a human ATM with a heart reliable, accessible, and taken completely for granted. My daughter had made one thing abundantly clear today. I wasn't enough for them. Fine, it was time they learned what not enough really meant. I arrived home after dark. My modest 3-bedroom ranch house, a stark contrast to Jessica's mini, but it was paid for one of the few financial decisions I'd made for myself rather than for her. After Lisa died, I'd bought it with the insurance money, wanting Jessica to have stability during her childhood. It wasn't fancy, but it was home. Inside, evidence of my grandchildren was everywhere, drawings magnetized to the refrigerator, a small basket of toys in the corner of the living room, photos arranged carefully on every surface. I picked up a silver frame holding a picture from Emma's birth, Jessica looking exhausted but radiant, Robert beaming proudly, me standing awkwardly at the edge of the frame as if I might be cropped out at any moment. Perhaps I already had been. I set the photo face down and went to my office, the converted 3rd bedroom where I kept my important papers. The room was meticulously organized, a lifetime of financial documents filed in cabinets along one wall. I pulled out the drawer labeled Jessica and began removing folders. University loans, wedding expenses, house down payment, monthly support. Each file contained careful records of every dollar I'd given my daughter over the decades, along with the promissory notes she'd signed for the larger loans, notes I'd never attempted to collect on. The total was staggering, $487,342. Nearly $500,000. I'd never see again. Money that could have funded my own education, my own dreams, my own comfortable retirement. Instead, I lived modestly on Social Security and the small pension from the construction company while Jessica and Robert took luxury vacations and remodeled their gourmet kitchen. But it wasn't just the money, it was the time, the emotional investment, the love that had been accepted then discounted, appreciated then taken for granted. It was hearing that despite everything I'd sacrificed, I would never be enough for my own grandchildren. I opened my laptop and navigated to my online banking portal. For the past 3 years, I'd been sending Jessica $1,000 monthly from my retirement account, money she claimed was for the children's college funds but that I SUSPECTED financed their extravagant lifestyle. I'd set up the automatic transfers because Jessica had insisted it was easier for her accounting. 3 clicks and the transfers were canceled. Next, I logged into the joint checking account I'd established when Jessica was in college, an account I'd maintained all these years for emergencies. I'd deposited an extra $10,000 last year when Robert had mentioned investing in a startup. The money had disappeared without explanation or thanks. I transferred the remaining $7,846.19 to my personal account, then initiated the paperwork to close the joint account entirely. My hands were steady as I worked through each financial tie systematically. The credit card I'd co-signed for her in college, still active, still occasionally showing charges when she found something essential that didn't fit her monthly budget. Cancelled. The life insurance policy naming her as sole beneficiary revised. 2 split proceeds between Emma and Noah's education, bypassing their parents entirely through a trust that would only pay directly to universities. By midnight, I'd severed every financial connection except one, the deed to my house, which still listed Jessica as inheriting everything upon my death. I made a note to call my lawyer in the morning to change that as well. I should have felt guilty. A good father wouldn't cut off his child without warning, wouldn't retaliate for a hurtful comment, wouldn't keep score of past generosity. But a good daughter wouldn't treat her father like an outdated inconvenience. I slept better that night than I had in years. The next morning, I called Jessica's number, not surprised when it went to voicemail. She rarely answered my calls directly. Jessica, it's Dad. I've been thinking about our conversation yesterday, and you're right, you need space to raise your children your way. I'm canceling our standing transfers to give you that independence. I'll be traveling for a while, so don't worry if you can't reach me. Love you. Short, simple, and giving her exactly what she'd asked for. Distance from my outdated, inadequate presence. Next, I called my lawyer, Frank Russo, who'd handled my affairs since Lisa's death. Walter, How are things? Frank's boisterous voice boomed through the speaker. Need to make some changes, Frank. How soon can I see you? 2 hours later, I sat in Frank's wood-paneled office, explaining my decision to remove Jessica from my will. You sure about this, Walt? Frank asked, concern evident in his furrowed brow. Seems sudden. Not sudden at all, I replied. It's been decades in the making. I just finally opened my eyes. Frank nodded slowly. What do you want to do with the house, then? And your other assets? The house goes to Emma and Noah through a trust. They can sell it when they're both over 21 and split the proceeds for education, housing, whatever they need. But Jessica and Robert can't touch it. And the rest. Liquidate everything except enough to cover my expenses. I'm going to see some of this country before I die. Frank, all those places Lisa and I plan to visit after retirement. Frank smiled sadly. She would have wanted that for you, Walt. I know. 50 years is long enough to put life on hold. As I drove home from Frank's office, my phone rang. Jessica's name flashed on the screen. It had taken less than 24 hours for her to notice the canceled transfers. I let it go to voicemail, then listened to her message at the next stoplight. Dad, what's going on with the account? The bank says you closed it. And what's this about traveling? Call me back immediately. No concern for my well-being. No questions about why I might suddenly need change after decades of stagnation. Just immediate focus on the financial implications. I deleted the message without responding by that evening. I'd booked a flight to Arizona, the first stop on what I'd decided would be my second life tour. The Grand Canyon had been at the top of Lisa's bucket list. We'd always said we'd go for our 30th anniversary. As I packed a small suitcase with just the essentials, my phone exploded with notifications. Jessica had progressed from calling to texting. Dad, what's going on? Are you okay? Why did you close our account? This isn't funny. Call me back. Dad, I'm getting worried. If this is about yesterday, you completely misunderstood. We need to talk about the kids' tuition savings. The last one made me laugh out loud. There were no tuition savings, just money that vanished into their household budget month after month. I turned off my phone and finished packing. 3 days later, I stood at the edge of the Grand Canyon, watching the sunset paint the ancient rock formations in shades of gold and crimson. Lisa would have loved this. I could almost hear her exclaiming over the vastness, the colors, the sheer magnificence of it. Took me long enough to get here, didn't it? I said aloud, not caring if other tourists thought I was a crazy old man talking to himself. My phone, which I'd turned back on primarily to take photos, vibrated in my pocket. Jessica again? I'd ignored 15 calls and twice as many texts in the past 72 hours. This time, I decided to answer. Hello, Jessica. Dad. Her voice was sharp with relief and anger. Where are you? Why haven't you been answering my calls? I've been worried sick. I'm at the Grand Canyon. I replied calmly. It's beautiful. Your mother always wanted to see it. The Grand? Dad, what are you doing? You can't just disappear like this. And what's going on with the accounts? The transfers stopped. The joint account is closed, and the credit card company says you removed me as an authorized user. All true, I confirmed. But why? Is this because of what I said about the kids' schedule? Dad, if you're upset, I'm not upset. Jessica, I'm awake. You made it very clear that I'm not enough for you, or for my grandchildren. I'm respecting your assessment. That's not what I is, it's exactly what you meant. I interrupted, my voice still calm. And you know what? You're right. I'm not enough, not as an ATM, not as a safety net, not as a grandfather who gets to see his grandchildren on your terms and your schedule. Silence on the other end. Then, is this about money? Dad, if you're having financial problems, I laughed, genuinely amused. Of course, that's where your mind goes. No, Jessica, I'm not having financial problems. In fact, for the first time in 50 years, my financial situation is improving because I'm not supporting 3 additional adults. 3. What are you talking about? You, Robert, and your lifestyle. Nearly $500,000 over the years, Jessica. College, wedding, house, monthly loans that were never repaid. I've financed your entire adult life. That's not fair. We've worked hard for what we have. Yes, you have. I agreed. And now you can work hard to maintain it without my help. So this is what punishment? Revenge because I asked for some boundaries with the kids. No, Jessica. This is me finally creating some boundaries of my own. I could hear her breathing change. The familiar build-up to tears that had worked on me since she was small. Dad, please, we need that money. The kids' activities, the mortgage, figure it out, I said. echoing the words she'd used when I'd asked about seeing my grandchildren more often. "You're smart, successful people. I'm sure you'll manage. You can't just cut us off." Her voice had shifted from manipulative tears to outrage. "What about Emma and Noah? Don't you care about their future?" "I care deeply. That's why my house and remaining assets will go into trusts for them that you and Robert can't access. For their education, their future." You changed your look. Now she sounded truly shocked. Double quotes, yes. "Yesterday. You can't do this." Her tone had turned cold, calculating. "I'll contest it. I'll claim you're not mentally competent." "Feel free to try," I replied. "Frank has extensive notes about my mental clarity and the reasons for my decisions, including detailed financial records of everything I've given you." Silence again, longer this time. "Why are you doing this?" she finally asked, her voice small. "Because it's time you learned what not enough really feels like, Jessica. Time for you and Robert to stand on your own feet. Time for me to live whatever years I have left." "What about the kids? They'll miss you." I closed my eyes against the pain of that particular manipulation. "Will they? 2 supervised hours per month, no gifts, no sleepovers, no real relationship. I don't think they'll notice much difference. Dad, ... I'll be in touch when I'm ready. Jessica, not before. Don't try to track me down, or send the police for a wellness check. I'm fine, better than I've been in decades." "You're punishing the children for something," I said. She accused. "No. I'm giving you exactly what you asked for. Freedom from my interference. Goodbye, Jessica." I ended the call and blocked her number. The sun had almost disappeared below the horizon, leaving just a faint glow illuminating the vast chasm before me. 50 years of putting everyone else first, of sacrificing my dreams, my needs, my very self on the altar of fatherhood. And what had it gotten me? A daughter who saw me as an outdated ATM, grandchildren who barely knew me, a life half-lived. No more. I took one last photo of the darkening canyon and headed back to my hotel. Tomorrow, I'd drive to Sedona, then perhaps to the Painted Desert. After that, who knew? For the first time since 1973, my life was entirely my own. 6 months passed in a blur of national parks, roadside diners, and cheap motels. I zigzagged across the country, crossing states off the list Lisa and I had made in our 20s. The Grand Canyon, Yellowstone, Yosemite, the Everglades. I sent myself postcards from each location, creating a paper trail of my journey that I arranged carefully in a leather-bound album. My phone remained blissfully silent after I blocked Jessica's number. I checked my email occasionally at public libraries, deleting without reading the increasingly infrequent messages from my daughter. Frank sent monthly updates about my financial situation, which had stabilized remarkably once I stopped hemorrhaging money to support Jessica's family. I'd expected to feel guilty, to miss my grandchildren desperately, to second-guess my decision daily. Instead, I felt lighter with each passing week, as if I'd set down a burden I hadn't realized I'd been carrying for decades. In a diner in Tennessee, I struck up a conversation with another solo traveler, Margaret, a retired English teacher exploring the country in a modest RV. "My husband died 3 years ago," she explained over pie and coffee. "Cancer. We'd always planned to travel after retirement, but ... but life had other plans." I finished for her. "My wife and I had the same dream. She's been gone much longer, 39 years now." Margaret's eyes widened. "And you waited all this time to start traveling?" I shrugged. "Had a daughter to raise? Then she had children. There was always a reason to put it off." "What changed?" "I realized I wasn't essential to them. Not in the ways that mattered." Margaret nodded, understanding in her eyes. "My son moved to Australia 10 years ago, calls on Christmas, sends photos of the grandkids I've never met. It's amazing how we can become irrelevant to the very people we centered our lives around." "Irrelevant," I repeated. "That's exactly it." We exchanged phone numbers before parting ways, promising to share travel It was the first new friendship I'd formed in years. After 7 months on the road, I decided it was time to go home. Not because I missed my old life, but because I was ready to start building a new one. The constant travel had shown me that while seeing new places was exhilarating, I wanted somewhere to belong. My house was exactly as I'd left it, though a fine layer of dust covered every surface. Frank had arranged for basic maintenance of the yard, but otherwise, it stood as a time capsule of my previous existence. I spent the first day cleaning, opening windows to let fresh air circulate through rooms that had been closed too long. In the second bedroom, the one I'd kept ready for Emma and Noah's visits that rarely materialized, I stripped the childish bedding and began boxing up the toys and books. This wouldn't be a shrine to absent grandchildren anymore, perhaps a home office or a reading room. On the third day back, as I was sorting through accumulated mail, there was a knock at my door. Jessica stood on my porch, noticeably thinner than when I'd last seen her, dark circles under her eyes. She wasn't wearing makeup, and her usual carefully styled hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail. "You're back," she said simply. "I am." We stared at each other for a long moment before I stepped aside to let her in. She walked past me into the living room, glancing around as if assessing what had changed. "How did you know?" I asked, closing the door. "Mrs. Peterson next door called me. She saw you bringing in groceries yesterday." I nodded. Caroline Peterson had been my neighbor for 20 years. She and Jessica had always gotten along well. "You look tired," I observed. Jessica's laugh was brittle. "That's what happens when you have to suddenly take on a second job because your financial support system disappears overnight." "I'm sorry it was sudden," I said, surprising myself with the apology. "That part wasn't fair." She looked at me sharply, "But the rest was, I think so, yes." Jessica sank onto my couch, the fight seeming to drain out of her. "Do you have any idea what the last 7 months have been like for us? Robert's company downsized his department. We've had to pull Emma out of her dance classes. Noah's private school, .. double quotes, she trailed off, shaking her head. That sounds difficult, I acknowledged. But those are choices, Jessica. Choices about priorities. Easy for you to say. You never had to worry about providing opportunities because I was too busy working 2 jobs to keep a roof over our heads and food on the table. I cut in. Your mother died when you were 8, Jessica. I was a single father with a high school education trying to give you everything. Don't talk to me about difficult choices." She had the grace to look ashamed. "I know you sacrificed for me, Dad, do you? Because from where I'm standing, you've spent your adult life treating me like a financial resource rather than a father. And when I wanted to be a grandfather, a real one, not just a name on Christmas presents, I was told I wasn't good enough." Tears filled her eyes. "I never said you weren't good enough." "Yes, you did. Your exact words were that I would never be enough for them. For Emma and Noah. I meant I know what you meant. That my values, my experiences, my love wasn't sufficient for your children's exacting standards. That I was an embarrassment to be managed rather than a grandfather to be embraced." The tears spilled over now, tracking down her cheeks. "We've missed you. The kids keep asking where you went." "Do they?" I asked, genuinely curious. I didn't think they'd notice, given how little they saw me. Of course they noticed. "They love you, Dad." I sat down in my recliner, suddenly feeling every one of my 73 years. "What do you want, Jessica? Why are you here?" She wiped at her tears. I need you to come back, to be part of our lives again. And the money, the transfers, the financial support." She hesitated just long enough to confirm what I already knew. This wasn't about missing me. It was about missing my checkbook. "We can discuss that," she said carefully. "I know things got out of hand before, but we can find a balance." "No." The single word hung between us. "No," she repeated, double quotes. "No. I won't be resuming financial support. No. I won't be available whenever it's convenient for you but invisible when it's not. No. I won't accept being told I'm not enough for my own grandchildren. Dad, please, I love you, Jessica. You're my daughter, and nothing will ever change that. But I'm done being used." Used? Is that what you think this is? Nearly $500,000 over 25 years. Money that disappeared into your lifestyle while I lived on Social Security and a small pension. What would you call it? She stood up, anger replacing the tears. "I'd call it being a father. That's what parents do. They support their children, adult children, through designer kitchens and private schools and European vacations." "No, Jessica, that's not what parents do. That's what ATMs do." "So that's it. You're just done with us?" I shook my head. "I'm done being a financial resource. Whether I'm done with you and the children depends entirely on you." "What does that mean?" "It means I'm happy to be a father and grandfather, a real one, not a checkbook. I'd love to have actual relationships with Emma and Noah. Regular visits, not just supervised hours when it's convenient. Phone calls, normal family interactions. And if we need help, if the kids need something important, define important." I challenged. "College, yes, I've already set up trusts for that. Medical emergency, of course. But kitchen renovations and private school tuition, no. Jessica, those aren't needs, they're wants." She stood silently for a long moment, conflict clear on her face. Finally, she said, "I should go. Probably, I agreed. But Jessica? The door is open. For a real relationship, just not an ATM arrangement. She nodded stiffly and walked out without another word. As I watched her drive away, I realized I felt no guilt, no overwhelming urge to call her back and promise to fix everything. For the first time in 50 years, I was putting myself first and it felt right. 3 weeks passed with no word from Jessica. I settled back into life in Clayton, but with significant changes. I joined a senior center where I took up woodworking classes, something I'd always enjoyed but never had time to pursue. I volunteered at the local library reading to children twice a week. I started having coffee regularly with Caroline Peterson from next door, who was also widowed, and, I discovered, excellent company. Life developed a pleasant rhythm that centered around my interests rather than someone else's emergencies. I slept better. I ate better. I even lost 15 pounds and had to buy new pants. Frank stopped by one afternoon with papers for me too. Signed the final documents establishing the educational trusts for Emma and Noah. Everything's in order, he assured me, watching me review the paperwork. The money can only be used for education. Jessica and Robert will have no access. Perfect, I said, signing where indicated. Thank you for handling this so efficiently. Frank, of course. He hesitated before adding, she called my office. You know, Jessica. I looked up sharply. When last week, wanted to know if there was any way to contest the changes to your will. I told her there wasn't, unless she wanted to try to have you declared incompetent, which would be virtually impossible, given your obvious mental clarity. I appreciate that, Walter. Frank leaned forward, his expression serious. I've been your attorney for 30 years. In that time, I've watched you give everything to Jessica. I've never said anything because it wasn't my place. But, I'm glad you're finally living for yourself. I smiled, touched by the unexpected support. Better late than never, right? Absolutely. After Frank left, I sat on my back porch with a glass of iced tea, watching the sunset and thinking about Jessica's attempt to challenge my will. Not surprising, but disappointing nonetheless. Still, I refused to let it spoil my newfound peace. The next morning, as I was heading out for my woodworking class, a familiar SUV pulled into my driveway. Jessica emerged, looking nervous. But what caught my attention were the two small figures who tumbled out after her, Emma and Noah. Now 8 and 6, both significantly taller than when I'd last seen them. Grandpa, Emma shouted, racing toward me with Noah close behind. They collided with me in a tangle of small arms and excited voices, nearly knocking me off balance. Over their heads, I met Jessica's eyes, question clear in my expression. We thought maybe we could visit, she said quietly. If you're not busy. I hugged my grandchildren tightly, emotion threatening to overwhelm me. I'm never too busy for you two, I said honestly. We brought breakfast, Noah announced, holding up a paper bag that smelled of cinnamon. Mom said you like sticky buns. I do indeed, I confirmed, smiling at Jessica over their heads. That was thoughtful. I ushered them inside, listening to their excited chatter about school, friends, and the toys they'd brought to show me. Jessica followed more hesitantly, carrying a cardboard box that she set carefully on my coffee table. What's this? I asked as the children ran to explore the backyard they barely remembered. Jessica bit her lip. Some things I thought you might want to see. School projects, art, photos from the last 7 months. I opened the box to find it neatly organized with folders labeled with dates, each containing drawings, school papers, and photographs documenting the children's lives during my absence. The gesture was unexpected and touching. Thank you, I said simply. Jessica nodded, watching the children through the window. I've been doing a lot of thinking since you came back. Yeah. She turned to face me, her expression more serious than I'd seen in years. You were right, about all of it. I've been treating you like a resource, not a father. And I'm sorry. The apology caught me off guard. Jessica had never been one to admit fault easily, a trait she'd inherited from me, if I was being honest. What changed? I asked. Everything. She laughed without humor. Robert lost his job. Completely this time, not just a department downsizing. The company folded. We've had to sell the house, move to a smaller place. I've taken extra consulting work. The kids had to leave their private school. She shook her head. It's been humbling. I'm sorry about Robert's job, I said, and meant it. Despite my issues with my son-in-law, I'd never wished hardship on their family. Don't be. It's been good for us. In a way. We've had to reassess what matters. And it turns out, most of what we thought was essential isn't through the window. I watched Emma pushing Noah on the old tire swing hanging from the oak tree, a swing I'd installed decades ago for Jessica. "And what is essential?" I asked. Jessica's eyes followed mine to her children. "Family. Real relationships. Not appearances or status or any of that stuff we've been chasing." I nodded, unsure what to say, after a lifetime of words that fell on deaf ears. Silence seemed the wiser choice. "I miss you, Dad," Jessica said suddenly, her voice breaking. "The kids miss you, and I'm not here for money. I'm here because I realized something when you disappeared." "What's that?" "That you've always been enough. More than enough. We just got too blind to see it." The words I'd waited decades to hear. I wanted to savor them, to hold on to the vindication I'd sought for so long. But looking at my daughter, really looking at her, I saw not the entitled woman who'd dismissed me 7 months ago, but the little girl who'd once waited by the window for me to come home from my second job, who'd made me handprint cards on Father's Day, who'd called me her hero. "I've missed you too, Jessie," I said, using the childhood nickname she'd outgrown in high school. She smiled through tears. "I was such an idiot, thinking all that stuff mattered more than having you in our lives." "We all make mistakes," I offered. "Some bigger than others." She took a deep breath. "I don't expect things to go back to how they were. I know the financial support is over, and that's fair, but I'm hoping, I'm hoping we can start over. As a real family, no conditions, no schedules, no supervised visits. Just us." Outside, Noah had found an old basketball in the garage and was attempting to dribble. Emma was giving instructions with the authority of an 8-year-old who believed herself an expert at everything. "I'd like that," I said, feeling a weight lift that I hadn't realized I was still carrying. "But Jessica, I need to know this isn't temporary, that when things improve financially, and they will. You're both smart and capable, you won't go back to seeing me as an inconvenience." "I won't," she promised. "I've learned my lesson the hard way." "We both have. And Robert?" I had to ask. "Where does he stand in all this?" "He's adjusting. It's been hard on his pride, the job loss, downsizing our lifestyle, but he's the one who suggested we come today, said it was time to rebuild bridges instead of burning them." I raised my eyebrows in surprise. Perhaps there was hope for my son-in-law after all. "And the kids?" I asked. "Last I heard, I was too permissive to be trusted with them." Jessica winced. "I was awful, wasn't I? The truth is, they've been asking about you constantly. Where's Grandpa? When is Grandpa coming back? They've missed you terribly." The door banged open and the children tumbled back inside, faces flushed with excitement. "Grandpa, can we have the sticky buns now?" Noah asked, climbing onto my lap without hesitation, as if the months of separation had never happened. "Absolutely," I agreed, ruffling his hair. "And maybe after, we can drive down to Lakeview Park. They've got a new playground I hear is pretty spectacular." "Yes." Emma bounced on her toes. "Can we, Mom? Please." Jessica nodded. "That sounds perfect. Maybe we could get lunch after. I know a great diner nearby," I offered. "Best milkshakes in the county." "Milkshakes!" both children exclaimed in unison, as we sat around my kitchen table eating sticky buns, the conversation flowing more easily than it had in years. I realized that I'd gotten exactly what I wanted, not revenge, but recognition, not control, but respect. A chance to be a grandfather, a father, a whole person in their lives. I caught Jessica watching me with a mixture of affection and regret. "What?" I asked. "I was just thinking," she said quietly, "about all the time we wasted, all the years you could have been part of their daily lives." "We can't change the past," I told her, "but we can decide what happens next." "And what's that?" I smiled, watching my grandchildren lick cinnamon and sugar from their fingers. "Whatever we want it to be. We're family." "That means something. It always has." "Even when I forgot?" Jessica asked, her voice small. Even then, I reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "Family isn't about money or convenience, Jessie. It's about showing up for each other, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard." "I'm ready to show up now," she promised. "All of us are." Later that day, as we walked through the park watching Emma and Noah race ahead, toward the playground, Jessica linked her arm through mine. "You know what the hardest part was?" she asked. "Of these last few months." "What's that?" "Realizing that everything I've accomplished, my education, my career, my confidence, came from the foundation you gave me, and I'd been taking credit for it all, as if I'd done it alone." "You did do it," I corrected her. "I just gave you the tools." She shook her head. "You gave me more than tools, Dad. You gave me everything, and it took losing you to realize it. Ahead of us." Noah called out from the top of the slide, waving frantically for us to watch his descent. Emma was already swinging as high as the chains would allow. Her face tilted toward the sun. "You haven't lost me," I assured her. "You never will." And as we joined my grandchildren on the playground, me pushing Noah on the swing while Jessica helped Emma across the monkey bars, I realized that disappearing had given me exactly what I needed. Not the satisfaction of revenge, but the joy of being truly seen, truly valued. For the first time in decades, it had taken Jessica losing everything to realize what had been in front of her all along, and it had taken me walking away to understand that I deserved better, that we all did. Sometimes the greatest gift you can give your children isn't financial support or endless sacrifice. Sometimes it's the hard truth they need to grow. And sometimes, the most powerful thing a parent can do is simply walk away, not in anger or bitterness, but with enough self-respect to demand better. Because in the end, we teach people how to treat us. And after 73 years, I'd finally learned that lesson myself. If you enjoyed this story, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. Share your thoughts in the comments below. To listen to the next story, click the box on the left.